My sister tried to take full custody of my niece who I raised for a decade. She handed me a private school brochure and said, "Zoe starts at her new school Monday." When I asked why she was doing this now, she adjusted her watch and said, "Because I finally can." I just stared at her. That was 6 weeks ago. Today, she showed up to court alone. No husband, no ring, no smile. I was 27 when my sister showed up at my door, hammered, smelling like hard liquor, holding this tiny little girl in a hospital blanket. This was the first time I'd seen my sister in over a year. We weren't even close. I have no idea why she came to me to foster her child, but she did. She told me she can't be a mother in her current state and handed the baby over to me without another word. Then she got in the cab that she came here in and drove off. I just stood there shocked. The worst part was that I had told my sister so many times I never wanted to be a dad, and that had never changed. But what could I do? I just took the baby in. I named her Zoe, figured a nice name would go far. I never expected to bond much with her, but before I knew it, I found myself reading her stories, playing with her, acting like a dad. I raised her on my own, and as my own. Zoe grew up kind and sharp, with this wild curiosity and a weird obsession with marine biology. She called me dad before she was even 2. I never told her not to. That's why it hurt so much. Because for 10 years I gave her everything I could. She was mine. At least it felt that way. I never officially adopted her, but that was supposed to happen eventually. Until one day out of nowhere, my sister called. I hadn't heard her voice in 10 years. She said she was sober, married now, working at a vet clinic. She said she wanted to see her daughter. Her voice was too calm, like she'd just gone on a long vacation and wanted to pick up where she left off. I stood there in my kitchen staring at the wall while the pasta boiled over. All I could say was, "You're really doing this now?" She told me she was coming in 2 weeks, said it was time to honor the promise I made 10 years ago, the promise that I'd only keep Zoe until she got her life together. I never made that promise. She never even said a word before dumping Zoe. Either way, I didn't sleep much after that. I kept looking at Zoe and wondering if I was doing the right thing by keeping the truth from her. I had never told her. Eventually, I sat her down at the table, hands shaking, and told her everything. That I wasn't her biological dad, that I was her uncle, that her real mom was coming to visit. She didn't cry at first. She just stared at me. Then her eyes went hard. I tried to explain that I hadn't lied out of malice, that I just wanted to protect her, that none of this changed how I felt about her. But she didn't say a word. She got up, slammed her door, and didn't speak to me for 2 days. She cried a lot during this time, but if I tried comforting her, she'd just push me away. It was hard, and what made it even harder was when her mom arrived. I barely recognized her at first. She was clean, polished, polite. She brought photo albums and old baby clothes, trying to show Zoe some kind of history. Zoe didn't want anything to do with her, but then I noticed the shift. They began staying up together. Zoe started asking more and more questions. They began hanging out, but only when I wasn't looking, almost as if they were afraid of me. And then came the gifts. A new necklace Zoe didn't have before, a new hoodie, a pair of earrings Zoe swore a friend gave her. I remember following Zoe after school once where I saw her and my sister sitting on a park bench. My sister was handing her a Starbucks drink like they did it all the time. I didn't interfere there and then, but I confronted my sister that night, and she didn't deny the fact she was trying to take Zoe. She said, "You don't have legal custody. I already filed to get her back." I nearly dropped the mug in my hand. She said it in a tone like it was a business transaction, like I was just holding her package for her. I went to a lawyer the next morning and he confirmed the worst. I had no legal standing, no adoption papers, no parental rights, 10 years of raising her, but in the eyes of the law, I was just a babysitter. And so that same night, my sister and I fought. It got loud and ugly. 10 years of resentment exploded in my kitchen. I screamed that she left because she couldn't be a mother, gave her kid to me when she knew damn well I never wanted kids. And now that I love Zoe like my own, she was trying to take her. And that's when, right as I was yelling about how I never wanted kids, Zoe walked in. She heard everything, and she just stared at me. "You don't like me?" she asked, her eyes filling with tears. Me and my sister instantly stopped fighting, but it was too late, because right as we did, Zoe bolted out the door. We both chased her, calling her name down the street, but she was gone. We called the police, instantly informing them what was happening. We began searching parks and stores and the library. Hours passed. My throat was raw from shouting. I was crying. My sister was crying. It seemed like for those hours, we didn't care who became her parent. We both just wanted her back. The police found her at the aquarium. It was closed, but apparently one of the night guards saw her sitting outside crying and let her in to look at the fish. I should have known. That place was her happy spot. We rushed over there immediately. My sister tried to get in the car with me, but I told her to take her own. I needed time to think. I needed to figure out what to say to Zoe. When I got there, I found her sitting cross-legged in front of the big shark tank. Her face was all puffy from crying. The security guard, an older guy named Marcus, was sitting a few feet away keeping an eye on her. He nodded at me when I walked in. I sat down next to Zoe without saying anything. We just watched the sharks swim for a while. Finally, I told her I was sorry she heard what I said. I explained that when my sister first brought her to me, I hadn't wanted to be a dad, but that changed the moment I held her. I told her how scared I was that first night, Googling how to take care of a baby while she slept in a makeshift crib I made from a drawer. How I'd called my neighbor Barbara at 2 a.m. because I didn't know why she wouldn't stop crying. how I'd learned to do pigtails by watching YouTube videos. Zoe just kept staring at the sharks. Then she asked if I was going to let her mom take her away. My heart sank. I didn't know what to say. Legally, I had no leg to stand on, but I couldn't just tell her that. Before I could answer, my sister burst in. She rushed over and tried to hug Zoe, but Zoe flinched away. My sister looked hurt, then angry. She started saying how she was Zoe's real mother and how I had no right to keep them apart, how she'd made mistakes but deserved a second chance. The security guard, Marcus, looked uncomfortable and stepped away to give us privacy. I was about to argue back when Zoe stood up. She looked at both of us and said she wanted to go home. My sister smiled triumphantly, but then Zoe walked over and took my hand. My sister's face fell. She started saying something about court orders and custody rights, but Zoe just tugged on my hand, and we walked out. The ride home was quiet. I knew this wasn't over. My sister wouldn't just give up, and legally, she had all the power. I needed to figure something out fast. The next morning, I called in sick to work. I made Zoe's favorite breakfast, chocolate chip pancakes shaped like fish. She seemed better, but still quiet. She went to school, and I spent the day researching custody laws. Everything I found was discouraging. Without formal adoption papers, I had almost no rights. My sister could take Zoe whenever she wanted. Around noon, my doorbell rang. It was my sister, with a man she introduced as her husband, Richard. They looked like they'd stepped out of a catalog. Matching sweaters, perfect hair. Richard had this fake smile that didn't reach his eyes. They asked to come in, and I reluctantly let them. My sister had brought paperwork, a whole folder of it. She spread it out on my kitchen table: birth certificate, medical records, school enrollment forms. She pointed out how her name was on everything as the mother, and how nowhere was I legally recognized as anything. Richard kept nodding along, occasionally adding legal terms I didn't understand. I felt sick. They were talking about Zoe like she was property. My sister mentioned something about being generous and allowing me visitation if I cooperated. Richard suggested I could see Zoe on holidays. They had it all planned out. They'd move her to their house in Portland next week. New school, new bedroom, already decorated, new life. They even had a puppy waiting for her. I just sat there, feeling more helpless by the minute. Then my sister dropped another beam. She pulled out her phone and showed me pictures of their house, Zoe's new room, the backyard with a swing set. Then she swiped to a picture of Zoe smiling with them at an ice cream shop. Dated yesterday. We've been meeting up with her for weeks, she said. She's warming up to the idea. She was upset at first, but kids adapt. I felt betrayed. Zoe had been seeing them behind my back, but then I remembered the gifts, the Starbucks. My sister had been working on Zoe for longer than I realized. When they finally left, I sat at my kitchen table for a long time. I couldn't lose Zoe. She was my daughter in every way that mattered. But what could I do? I had no legal standing. My sister had all the documentation, and now she was trying to turn Zoe against me. I picked up my phone and called the only person I could think of who might help, my old college roommate Jamie, who was now a family lawyer in a neighboring city. I hadn't talked to him in years, but this was an emergency. He agreed to meet me the next day. When Zoe got home from school that day, she was different, quieter. She went straight to her room without our usual chat about her day. I made her favorite dinner, mac and cheese with little hot dog pieces cut up in it, but she barely touched it. When I asked what was wrong, she just shrugged and said she was tired. I didn't push it. I figured she needed space after everything that had happened. That night, I found a brochure on the kitchen counter for a private school in Portland. My sister must have left it there on purpose. It had all these glossy pictures of kids in uniforms, a fancy science lab, and a note scribbled in the margin. Zoe would love the marine biology program here. I crumpled it up and threw it in the trash, watching it land with a soft thud among coffee grounds and eggshells. The next morning, I drove to meet Jamie at a coffee shop halfway between our towns. The drive gave me time to rehearse what I'd say, though my thoughts kept scattering like leaves in wind. I hadn't seen him in years, but he looked exactly the same, just with less hair and more wrinkles around his eyes that crinkled when he recognized me. We did the quick catch-up thing, but I was too anxious to care about his divorce or new condo. I just needed help. I laid it all out for him, the whole story from the night my sister showed up drank with a baby to the current nightmare. Jamie listened, occasionally taking notes in a leather-bound notebook, his expression growing more serious with each detail. When I finished, he didn't look optimistic. "Look, I'm not going to sugarcoat this," he said, setting down his coffee cup carefully. "Without formal adoption papers, you're in a tough spot. Biologically and legally, your sister has the stronger claim." My stomach dropped. I'd been hoping for some legal loophole, some magic solution that would make this all go away. "But," he continued, leaning forward, "there's something called de facto parentage that might help. You've been Zoe's primary caregiver for 10 years. That counts for something." He explained I could file for custody based on being Zoe's psychological parent. It wouldn't be easy, and it would take time, but it was something. He agreed to help me file the paperwork right away, his eyes showing a determination that gave me a sliver of hope. When I got home, I found Zoe sitting on the couch with my sister. They were looking at a photo album I'd never seen before. Old family pictures from before Zoe was born, the edges yellowed with age. My sister was pointing at faces, telling stories. She looked up when I walked in, all innocent, like she hadn't just been trying to legally steamroll me the day before. "Oh, we were just catching up on family history," she said, her voice honey-sweet. "Zoe didn't know Grandma used to be a competitive swimmer." I felt a stab of guilt. I should have told Zoe more about our family, but I'd been so focused on building our own little world, I'd kind of shut out the past, letting old memories gather dust in the corners of my mind. Zoe looked at me with confusion in her eyes. Dad, why didn't you ever tell me about Great Aunt Meredith's aquarium? Mom says she had like 50 fish tanks in her house. Dad. She still called me Dad. And Mom. That was new. My sister smiled smugly, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, a gesture so familiar it took me back to our childhood fights. That night, after my sister left, I tried to talk to Zoe about everything. I asked her how she felt about possibly moving to Portland. She just shrugged and said, I don't know. They have a really cool marine biology program at the school there. And Richard said he could get me scuba lessons for my birthday. Richard. The stepdad she'd just met was already Richard, not Mr. Whatever. I felt like I was losing ground by the minute, watching sand slip through my fingers no matter how tightly I tried to hold on. The next few days were tense. My sister came by every day, always bringing something for Zoe. Books about ocean life, a fancy new backpack with embroidered sea turtles, once even a microscope that probably cost more than my weekly paycheck. I couldn't compete with that. I was barely making ends meet as it was, the stack of bills on my desk a constant reminder. One afternoon, I came home early from work and found my sister going through our mail. She jumped when I walked in, quickly putting down the stack of envelopes, her fingers fluttering nervously. Just helping organize, she said with a fake smile that didn't reach her eyes. You always were messy, even as a kid. I didn't believe her for a second. Later, I noticed several pieces of mail were missing, including a letter from Jamie I'd been expecting with some legal documents to sign. The empty space in the mail pile felt like a warning. I called Jamie immediately. He confirmed he'd sent the papers 3 days ago. They should have arrived already. When I told him my suspicions, he got real quiet, the silence stretching between us like a taut wire. Listen, he finally said, if she's intercepting your mail, that's a federal offense. But it's also a sign she's getting desperate. Be careful. Document everything. So I started keeping a log. Every visit, every gift, every weird comment. I installed a small camera in the living room. Nothing creepy. Just a basic security cam that would record if there was movement. I needed evidence if things got ugly. And they did get ugly. Fast. The next day, a social worker showed up at my door. A woman named Patricia with a clipboard and a serious expression. Her gray pantsuit as no nonsense as her close-cropped hair. She explained she was doing a home evaluation based on a report of concerning conditions. Someone had claimed I was neglecting Zoe. I was stunned. My house wasn't fancy, but it was clean and safe. Zoe had everything she needed, maybe not the latest gadgets or designer clothes, but plenty of love and stability. I invited Patricia in, showed her around. She took notes, asked questions about Zoe's routine, checked the fridge, peeked in Zoe's room. She seemed satisfied that everything was fine, but said she'd need to interview Zoe separately. When Zoe got home from school, Patricia talked with her alone in her bedroom for about 20 minutes. I paced the hallway the entire time, imagining the worst. The floorboards creaked beneath my feet as I moved back and forth, straining to hear anything through the closed door. When they came out, Zoe looked confused but not upset. Patricia thanked us both and left, saying she'd be filing her report soon. What was that about? Zoe asked after Patricia left, her backpack still slung over one shoulder. I didn't want to worry her, so I just said it was a routine check that all families go through sometimes. She seemed to buy it, but I was furious. I knew exactly who had called in that report. I confronted my sister the next day when she came by with yet another gift for Zoe, this time an expensive-looking telescope. I waited until Zoe went to her room, then let loose. I told her I knew what she did, that it was a low blow even for her. She didn't even deny it, just adjusted her designer watch as if checking how much longer she needed to endure my anger. I'm just making sure my daughter is in a safe environment, she said with this fake concern in her voice. Single men raising young girls. People have questions. I wanted to scream. She was trying to make me sound like some kind of predator. My own sister. I told her to get out of my house, my voice shaking with rage. Fine, she said, gathering her purse. But you should know, Richard and I have already enrolled Zoe in her new school. She starts next Monday. That was 5 days away. They were planning to take her in 5 days. The timeline hit me like a physical blow. I called Jamie in a panic. He told me to stay calm, though I could hear the urgency in his voice too. The paperwork for our custody case had been filed. He'd sent a second copy directly to his office for me to sign after the first one mysteriously disappeared. But these things take time. We wouldn't get a hearing for at least a couple of weeks. They can't just take her, right? I asked, pacing my kitchen. I mean, they need some kind of court order? Jamie hesitated, and that pause told me everything before he even spoke. Technically no, since your sister is the biological parent and there's no custody order in place. She could legally take Zoe at any time, but that would look bad for her in court. It would show she's not considering Zoe's emotional well-being. That wasn't reassuring at all. I decided I needed backup. I called Barbara, my neighbor who'd helped me figure out how to care for baby Zoe all those years ago, teaching me how to change diapers, how to check if formula was too hot, how to soothe a colicky infant. She'd been like a grandmother to Zoe ever since. I also reached out to Zoe's teachers, her best friend's parents, anyone who could vouch for our relationship and the stability of her life here. Meanwhile, my sister was working overtime on Zoe. She started picking her up from school before I could get there. They'd go for ice cream or shopping, and Zoe would come home with new clothes or toys, her eyes bright with excitement. One day she came home with a phone, a brand new iPhone that my sister had gotten her, sleek and expensive in its glossy case. Mom says I need it for when I move to Portland, she told me, not meeting my eyes, so we can text and stuff. I felt like I was being erased, piece by piece, my role in her life slowly being painted over. That Friday, I took a day off work and went to Zoe's school. I talked to her teachers, the principal, the school counselor. I explained the situation, asked them to be aware that only I should be picking Zoe up from now on. They were sympathetic, but said without a court order, they couldn't prevent her mother from taking her. Their hands were tied by legal realities I hadn't prepared for. When I got home, I found my sister sitting on my couch, flipping through a magazine as if she owned the place. She had a key. I never gave her a key. "Where did you get that?" I demanded, pointing at the key in her hand, its metal catching the afternoon light. "Zoe gave it to me," she said casually, "in case of emergencies." I told her to give it back. She just laughed and dropped it in her purse with a dismissive flick of her wrist. "Look," she said, "this doesn't have to be so difficult. Richard and I are willing to be generous. You can visit Zoe in Portland whenever you want. We have a guest room. You'll always be her uncle." Uncle, not dad. Uncle. Like the last 10 years meant nothing. Like all the nightmares I'd soothed, all the fevers I'd monitored, all the school projects I'd helped with were just babysitting services. I was about to respond when my phone rang. It was Jamie. I stepped into the kitchen to take the call, my heart pounding. "We got lucky," he said, his voice energized. "Judge Casey agreed to hear our emergency motion on Monday morning. She's known for being fair in these cases." Monday, the same day my sister planned to take Zoe. It was going to be close, a race against time with my daughter's future as the prize. I went back to the living room to find my sister gone. She'd left a note on the coffee table, taking Zoe for dinner and a movie. Don't wait up. Her handwriting was the same loopy style I remembered from childhood, when she'd leave notes on my door telling me to stay out of her room. She hadn't even asked me, just took my daughter and left. I tried calling Zoe's new phone, but it went straight to voicemail, her voice sounding strangely formal in the recorded message. They didn't come back until after 11. I'd been sitting in the dark, worried sick, imagining them halfway to Portland already. When they finally walked in, Zoe was wearing a new jacket with a price tag I didn't want to think about, and looked tired but happy. My sister gave me a smug look and said they'd had a girls' night. I wanted to yell, but not in front of Zoe. I just told Zoe it was way past her bedtime and she needed to get ready for bed. She hugged my sister goodnight, a long, tight hug that made my chest hurt, and went to her room, her footsteps dragging with fatigue. My sister lingered by the door. "We had a good talk tonight," she said, adjusting her designer scarf. "Zoe's excited about Portland. She's a little nervous, but I told her change is good for kids, builds character." I couldn't hold back anymore. I told her she had no idea what Zoe needed, that she'd been absent for 10 years, that she couldn't just waltz back in and play mom when it suited her. She listened with this patronizing smile that made me want to scream. "You know what's funny?" she said when I finished. "You keep talking about what's best for Zoe, but have you asked her what she wants? Because I have, and she told me she's curious about living with her real mom." That hit me like a punch to the gut. Had Zoe really said that? Or was my sister manipulating her, manipulating me? The doubt crept in like cold water, seeping into every crack. The weekend was tense. My sister came by both days, taking Zoe out for hours at a time. I tried to get some one-on-one time with Zoe, but she was distant, distracted, her mind clearly elsewhere. On Sunday night, I noticed her suitcase was out. There were clothes folded neatly inside, arranged with a care I'd never seen in her usually messy room. "Are you packing?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, leaning against her doorframe. She nodded, not looking at me. "Mom says I should bring my favorite stuff. The rest we can get new in Portland." I sat down on her bed, the mattress sinking under my weight. "Zoe, do you want to go to Portland?" She shrugged, still not meeting my eyes. "I don't know. Maybe. They have a really cool aquarium there, and Mom says their house has a pool. But what about your friends here? Your school? What about—" I hesitated, my throat tight. "What about me?" She finally looked at me, her eyes confused and sad. "Mom says I can visit you on holidays, and you can come see me sometimes." I felt like I was losing her already. I told her we had to go to court tomorrow, that a judge was going to help decide what was best for her. Her eyes widened, a flash of fear crossing her face. "Like on TV? Do I have to talk to the judge?" I assured her she probably wouldn't have to talk to anyone, that it was mostly for grown-ups to figure things out. She seemed relieved, but still worried, biting her lower lip the way she always did when anxious. That night, I could barely sleep. I kept thinking about what would happen if the judge ruled against me. Would my sister just take Zoe away right then? Would I get to say goodbye? Would Zoe even want to say goodbye to me? I stared at the ceiling, watching shadows play across it as cars passed outside. Monday morning came too quickly. I got Zoe ready for school, trying to act normal. My sister texted saying she'd pick Zoe up from school at 3, and they'd come get her things after, like it was already decided, like my world wasn't hanging in the balance. I dropped Zoe off at school, hugging her extra tight. She squirmed away, embarrassed by my public display of affection. "Dad, people are watching," she whispered, adjusting her backpack. I watched her walk into the building, wondering if this was the last time I'd take her to this school, the last time she'd call me Dad. The courthouse was intimidating, all marble and echoes, with elevated ceilings that made me feel small and insignificant. Jamie met me outside, looking professional in his suit. He had a thick folder of documents, statements from Zoe's teachers, Barbara, even Marcus the security guard from the aquarium, who'd seen us there almost every weekend for years. all testifying to my relationship with Zoe, how well adjusted she was in my care. My sister and Richard were already inside with their lawyer, a sharp-looking woman named Jennifer with perfect hair and a suit that probably cost more than my car. They were all wearing coordinating outfits, like they'd planned it. My sister had her hair pulled back, looking every bit the responsible mother. I felt underdressed in my best button-up and khakis, suddenly aware of the coffee stain I'd missed on my sleeve. Judge Casey was a no-nonsense older woman with reading glasses on a chain and silver hair cut in a practical bob. She reviewed both our filings quickly, then asked each side to make their case. My sister's lawyer went first, talking about biological rights, how my sister had made mistakes, but was now stable and ready to parent, how I had never legally adopted Zoe despite having 10 years to do so. When it was our turn, Jamie emphasized the psychological parent doctrine. He showed pictures of Zoe growing up, her first day of kindergarten with me holding her hand, her science fair project about sharks that won first place, us at her swim meets. He had statements from her teachers about how well she was doing in school, how I never missed a parent-teacher conference. The judge asked a lot of questions. She wanted to know why I never formally adopted Zoe, why my sister suddenly reappeared after 10 years, whether Zoe was aware of what was happening. Both lawyers did a lot of talking. I mostly sat there feeling sick, my tie suddenly too tight around my neck. Finally, Judge Casey said she needed to speak with Zoe. My heart sank. I'd hoped to spare Zoe this part. The judge said she'd interview Zoe in her chambers alone that afternoon. Court would reconvene tomorrow morning for her decision. I left the courthouse feeling no better than when I'd arrived. Jamie tried to be encouraging, saying the judge seemed fair and thoughtful, but I couldn't shake the feeling that biology would trump everything else, that the law wouldn't see what I knew in my heart, that I was Zoe's real parent in every way that mattered. I picked Zoe up from school myself, getting there early to make sure my sister didn't try anything. Zoe seemed surprised to see me, scanning the parking lot as if looking for someone else. "Where's Mom?" she asked, looking around the parking lot, her new phone clutched in her hand. "She had some things to take care of," I said, trying to sound casual. "Listen, we need to stop by the courthouse on the way home. The judge wants to talk to you." Zoe looked nervous, her shoulders tensing. Am I in trouble? I assured her she wasn't, that the judge just wanted to hear about her life, her thoughts, that she should just be honest. "Even if the truth hurts your feelings?" she asked in a small voice that made her sound younger than her 10 years. My heart skipped a hit. "Even then," I said, "especially then." The judge's chambers were less intimidating than the courtroom, more like a nice office with bookshelves and plants. Judge Casey greeted Zoe warmly, offered her a soda from a mini fridge. I had to wait outside while they talked. It was the longest 30 minutes of my life, each second ticking by with excruciating slowness. When Zoe came out, her eyes were red like she'd been crying. She didn't say anything about what they discussed, and I didn't ask. We drove home in silence, the weight of unspoken words filling the car. My sister was waiting on our porch when we got home. She looked annoyed, tapping her foot impatiently. "I thought we agreed I'd pick her up," she said, her voice sharp. Before I could respond, Zoe ran up to her and hugged her. They went inside together, leaving me standing there like an outsider in my own home, the home where I'd raised her for a decade. That night was surreal. My sister stayed for dinner, helping Zoe finish packing. They talked about the new school, the new neighborhood, how Zoe would have her own bathroom in Portland. I just sat there, feeling like a ghost in my own house, watching my life slip away. After Zoe went to bed, my sister lingered in the kitchen. She actually seemed nervous for once. Her usual confidence dimmed. "Whatever happens tomorrow," she said, fidgeting with her car keys, "I want you to know I appreciate what you did for Zoe, taking her in when I couldn't." It was the closest thing to gratitude I'd heard from her since this whole thing started, but it still sounded like a goodbye, like she was already assuming she'd won. I barely slept that night. I kept getting up to check on Zoe, watching her sleep the way I used to when she was a baby. I thought about all the milestones, her first steps in our living room, her first day of school, the time she lost her first tooth eating an apple. 10 years of memories, 10 years of being her dad. Morning came too soon. I made Zoe's lunch for school, turkey sandwich with the crusts cut off, apple slices, fruit snacks shaped like sea creatures. Same lunch I'd made her for years. I wrote a little note on her napkin like I always did. "Love you to the moon and back," just in case it was the last one. The courtroom seemed even more intimidating the second day. My sister and Richard were already there, looking confident. Zoe was at school, where I'd dropped her off with a longer than usual hug. The judge entered, and everyone stood. Judge Casey didn't waste time. She said she'd reviewed all the evidence, spoken with Zoe, and considered what was in the child's best interest. She acknowledged my sister's biological rights, but also emphasized the importance of stability in a child's life. And then she made her ruling. Judge Casey looked directly at me, then at my sister. The courtroom felt like it was closing in. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear her words at first. "After careful consideration," she said, "I've decided to grant temporary custody to the uncle pending a full evaluation period of 6 months. My sister gasped. Richard put his arm around her. I just sat there, stunned. I hadn't lost. Not completely. Not yet. Judge Casey continued, explaining her decision. She said that while biological ties were important, Zoe's stability and emotional well-being had to come first. She ordered family counseling for all of us, and said my sister would have regular visitation rights. After 6 months, we'd come back to reassess. "This isn't over," my sister hissed at me as we left the courtroom. Her eyes were red and puffy. She's my daughter. I'll fight for her until my last breath. I believed her. This wasn't a victory, just a postponement. I had 6 months to figure something out, to make sure Zoe stayed with me permanently. Jamie patted me on the back and told me this was the best outcome we could have hoped for. I wasn't so sure. Picking up Zoe from school that afternoon was weird. I didn't know what to tell her. How do you explain to a 10-year-old that a judge decided where she gets to live? I ended up just saying that she'd be staying with me for now, but would still see her mom regularly. She seemed confused but didn't ask many questions. That night, my sister called. She was calmer now, her voice steady. She said she wanted to work out a visitation schedule. Every weekend, she suggested. I countered with every other weekend. We settled on every other weekend, plus Wednesday dinners. It felt like we were dividing up property, not arranging time with a child. The first month was rough. Zoe was confused and moody. She'd come back from visits with my sister full of stories about all the fun things they did, all the places they went. I couldn't compete with trips to the zoo and shopping sprees. I just kept doing what I'd always done, making her lunches, helping with homework, being there. Our first family counseling session was a disaster. The therapist, Dr. Karma, tried to get us to talk about our feelings. My sister cried about how she'd made mistakes, but deserved forgiveness. I tried to explain how I'd been there for 10 years while she was gone. Zoe just sat there looking miserable, picking at a loose thread on her jeans. After the session, Dr. Karma asked to speak with me alone. She told me Zoe was feeling caught in the middle, torn between loyalty to me and curiosity about her mother. She suggested I try to be more supportive of Zoe's relationship with my sister, no matter how hard that was for me. But she's trying to take her away, I said, my voice breaking a little. Right now, Zoe feels like both of you are trying to take her away from the other, Dr. Karma replied. She needs to know it's okay to love both of you. That hit me hard. I'd been so focused on fighting my sister that I hadn't considered how it was affecting Zoe. I decided to try a different approach. The next time my sister came to pick up Zoe for their Wednesday dinner, I invited her in for coffee first. She looked suspicious, but accepted. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where we'd had that explosive fight weeks earlier. This time, I asked her about her life, her job at the vet clinic, her marriage to Richard. She seemed surprised by my interest, but opened up a little. I really have changed, she said, stirring her coffee slowly. I know you don't believe me, but I have. I nodded. I believe you've changed. I just don't think that erases the past 10 years. She looked down at her cup. I was scared to come back sooner, afraid Zoe would hate me for leaving, afraid you'd slam the door in my face. I might have, I admitted. We didn't solve anything that day, but something shifted, a tiny crack in the wall between us. After that, drop-offs and pickups got a little easier. We started texting about Zoe's school stuff, sharing photos from our respective time with her. It wasn't friendship, but it was civil. Zoe noticed the change. She stopped looking so anxious when my sister came over. She started talking more freely about both of us, not hiding her excitement about seeing her mom or her stories about what we did together. About 3 months in, something unexpected happened. My sister's husband Richard showed up at my door on a Tuesday night. Zoe was already in bed. He looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot on my porch. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice lower than usual. I let him in, wary. We sat in the living room, surrounded by Zoe's artwork on the walls and her books scattered on the coffee table. Richard looked around, taking it all in. "Nice place," he said, though his tone suggested otherwise. I waited for him to get to the point. He cleared his throat a few times, then finally spoke. "Look, I'm going to be straight with you. This whole situation isn't working for me. I didn't sign up to be a part-time dad to someone else's kid." I bristled at someone else's kid, but kept quiet. "Your sister and I," he continued, "we had plans, travel, career advancement. A kid wasn't part of that, especially not one with so much baggage." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Baggage? You mean the trauma of being abandoned by her mother and then having her try to take her away from the only stable parent she's ever known? Richard had the decency to look embarrassed. "I just mean it's complicated, and I'm not cut out for complicated. I told your sister this weekend that she needs to choose, me or this custody battle." My mind was racing. "Does she know you're here?" He shook his head. "Number. And I'd appreciate if you kept this between us. I just thought you should know where things stand." After he left, I sat in the dark living room for a long time. I felt angry at Richard for his selfishness, but also a glimmer of hope. Maybe this would change things. Maybe my sister would back off. I didn't have to wait long to find out. The next day, my sister called and asked to meet at a coffee shop near her hotel, alone. When I got there, she was already seated in a corner booth, a half-empty mug in front of her. She looked tired, the kind of bone-deep exhaustion that makeup can't hide. "Richard left," she said without preamble. "He gave me an ultimatum. Drop the custody case or he's filing for divorce." I wasn't surprised after Richard's visit, but I pretended to be. "I'm sorry," I said, and meant it. Despite everything, she was still my sister. She shrugged, trying to look nonchalant, but not quite pulling it off. Turns out he wasn't father material after all. Freaked out when Zoe left a mess in the guest bathroom last weekend. We sat in silence for a minute. I didn't know what this meant for our situation. Was she giving up? Or doubling down now that she had nothing to lose? "I've been thinking," she finally said, tracing the rim of her mug with one finger. "Maybe Portland isn't the right move right now. Zoe has friends here, her school, you." She paused. "I was looking at apartments nearby, something with 2 bedrooms, so Zoe could stay over more comfortably." I felt a surge of relief, quickly followed by suspicion. Was this another strategy? Get Zoe comfortable with longer stays, then push for full custody again? My sister must have read my expression. "I'm not giving up on being her mom," she said firmly. But maybe I need to earn that title back, not just claim it because of DNA. It was the first time she'd acknowledged that her relationship with Zoe needed to be rebuilt, not just legally enforced. I didn't fully trust her sudden change of heart, but it seemed genuine. Over the next few weeks, things shifted again. My sister found an apartment about 15 minutes from our house. She got a job transfer to the local branch of her vet clinic. She started volunteering at Zoe's school, helping with the science fair. She was putting down roots, making an effort to fit into Zoe's life, rather than uprooting her. Our counseling sessions got better too. Dr. Karma noted the improvement in our communication. Zoe seemed happier, less torn. She started calling my sister Mom more naturally, not like she was trying it out or saying it to please her. She still called me Dad, with the same easy affection she always had. The 6-month evaluation period was almost up. Jamie advised me to document everything: the positive changes, my sister's integration into our community, Zoe's improved emotional state. We were preparing for our return to court, but with a different goal now. Instead of fighting for exclusive custody, we were working toward a formal co-parenting arrangement. The night before our court date, Zoe asked if she could talk to me. We sat on her bed, surrounded by her stuffed sea creatures and science posters. She seemed nervous, fidgeting with her favorite shark plushie. "Dad, are you and Mom still fighting over me?" she asked, her voice small. I shook my head. "Not anymore, Zozo. We're trying to figure out how to both be in your life in the best way possible." She nodded, thinking this over. "I was really mad at you for not telling me about Mom sooner, and I was mad at her for leaving me. But Dr. Karma says it's okay to be mad and still love someone." "Dr. Karma is pretty smart," I said, smiling a little. "I want to stay living with you," she said suddenly, the words rushing out. "But I want to see Mom a lot too. Is that okay?" I hugged her tight, relief washing over me. "That's more than okay, kiddo. That's exactly what we want too." The next day in court, Judge Casey seemed pleased with our progress. My sister and I presented a J-int custody proposal. Zoe would continue living primarily with me, with regular overnight visits with her mother. Holidays would be shared, major decisions would be made together, and most importantly, we'd continue family counseling to keep communication open. Judge Casey reviewed our proposal carefully, asked a few questions, then approved it with a smile. "This is the kind of outcome I always hope for," she said. Two parents putting aside their differences for the good of the child. As we left the courthouse, my sister surprised me by giving me a quick hug. "Thank you," she whispered, "for taking care of her when I couldn't, for being a better parent than I was ready to be." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. 10 years of resentment didn't disappear overnight, but something had healed between us. A bridge rebuilt, shakily at first, but growing stronger. That weekend, we had our first family dinner. Me, Zoe, and my sister. We ordered pizza and watched a documentary about deep-sea creatures that Zoe had been dying to see. It wasn't perfect. There were awkward moments, old tensions bubbling up occasionally, but there was laughter too, and a sense of possibility. Later, after my sister left and Zoe was in bed, I sat on the couch looking at old photos on my phone. Baby Zoe in my arms, toddler Zoe taking her first steps, school-age Zoe with missing front teeth. 10 years of memories, with more to come. Different now, with my sister in the picture, but not ending, not lost. I never wanted to be a dad. Life gave me no choice. But sitting there in the quiet house, listening to Zoe's soft snores from down the hall, I couldn't imagine any other path. Sometimes the things we don't choose end up choosing us, and sometimes that turns out to be exactly right.